if you were asked what's your business built out of, most agents would probably say, I think I've got some straw, I think I've got some sticks, and I think I've got some bricks, right? Well, that's exactly what I've done over the 27 years is I look at my business and say, you know, really, where do we stink? Like, where can we get much, much, much better? And inevitably, it was something I was running because I was running everything. What is the value that you provide to your team? And don't tell me it's leads, and don't tell me it's your knowledge and your mentorship, because none of that is retention. It's going to be good for retention later. The most money you can make on any given transaction is if you do the whole thing yourself.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Remington Ramsey, and today my guest is Rob Ellerman of the Reese Nichols Group, Reese Nichols Company out there in Kansas City. How you doing, Rob?
I'm good. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. You actually have an expansion team. I think the numbers, you consistently put up over 700 million locally, but then you have another 100 million or so year to year in 3 or 4 different markets. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. We have 4 offices here in Kansas City. We kind of cover all the quadrants in Kansas City, and then we go Southern Missouri, Springfield, Lake of the Ozarks, which is kind of a second home community to a lot of people. And then we are in Des Moines and Ames, Iowa, and we're with Remax there actually. And then in Florida, we're in St. Pete Beach with Remax, and Pensacola with HomeSmart, and then we're Ebby Halliday in Dallas, Texas.
Look at that. So I like doing numbers at the beginning. I like telling people where you're from and what you do in terms of numbers. That seems to wake people up. Oh, shoot, I should listen to this Rob guy. But where I'd like to start is your thoughts on why you chose different brokerages. Typically, when people do an expansion team, they're part of one of the mega brands and they expand within the brand. You've actually chosen to be a part of many different brands. How did you choose your markets, and how did you choose the brokerage within that market?
So Warren Buffett is one of the guys that I follow, and he's been fairly successful in his life, I think, right? So and so we kind of follow him, and he likes to go into a market and he buys a big local company, but he leaves the name. So even one of our big builders here in town, he bought them and kept the name.
Why is he doing that?
So I really like that theory, because now you're a national brand, but you have the local name.
Does he like the local name because he feels like people in the local markets respect the local name more?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like Reese Nichols example here has been around, forever. We have 3,000 agents. Everybody knows the name. Everybody goes to the website. I mean, it's just a great company here locally. So why would you come in and buy that and then change the name to where people that aren't paying attention to the acquisition doesn't understand it,
Right. So that makes sense for your local market. But when you go into other markets, you've chosen a couple of bigger names. How did you determine that and how did you choose your other markets? Do you just go where the talent is?
Yeah, so we have first, we always look at our sister company from here first, and sometimes each one is ran differently. And so sometimes that president of that company or whatever doesn't want to give us the same deal that we're looking for in order to be an expansion team. And so then we just look at market share and say, who has the biggest market share in that area or in the top 3. And so Iowa was a good example. We went up there and we interviewed several of the bigger brands, and the owners of the Remax franchise there just kind of rolled out the red carpet and knew who we were and did their research. And they're like, we want you guys as a part of our office, and it's been a great spot for us expansion up there. So yeah, every place is different. You can definitely go with the big brand and say, hey, I'm going to expand within that brand. But like, we've got probably 4 different expansion offices that, there's a lot of brands that they aren't in that office. So then what do you do? Just not go to that area, that you want to go to. So it just doesn't seem right to me to kind of pigeonhole myself into having to go where the brand goes.
Well, obviously you've been super mega successful with just the numbers and the agent count. What's the agent count up to now?
215-ish, I think.
So 215 agents under this brand, and I'd like to back up a little bit because you grew up pretty poor.
Yeah.
right? You graduated with a criminal justice degree, and you're on your own for the first 7 years, and decided I'm gonna become a mega real estate star. How did that happen?
Well, unfortunately, I wish I had the vision early on, and that that was the plan. But it started off just literally like, hey, I'm starting to do 10.5 million on my own. And after about 7 years, it was a grind from 2.1, 2.7, 3.5, got up to 10 and a half. Lots of transactions back then. I remember driving counter offers back and forth from the house. There was not dot loop and DocuSign and all that. Um, so I really just, things were falling through the cracks and I needed to hire somebody. So I hired my first agent, who's still with me today for 20 years later. And she was my buyer's agent. And we just went up from 10 and a half to like 11 and a half that year. And then we hired a paperwork assistant, an office manager, and we went to 16 and a half that year. And that's kind of how it started. But I think my growth has been different because it's been very organic. Like we grew when we needed it, right? Versus growing just to grow.
You didn't always have the vision of being in 17 different markets and having all this. You were literally just responding to the growth and what you needed in that moment.
Right, right. Yeah, we kind of got our first new construction neighborhood, and we put two people in that. So we need to hire two people to sit in that, and then it went really well. And another developer called us. I'm like, okay, I need two people for this neighborhood, and well, he had two neighborhoods, so we needed four. And then a developer called, at three neighborhoods. So we started running the new construction silo along with the resale silo.
It might seem oversimplified or yeah, just too basic, but I do feel like that mindset is different than what a lot of people like. I picture an agent listening to this and thinking, I want to be like Rob Ellerman, and he's got 200 plus agents. I just need to start recruiting. I just need to recruit, 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 and that's how I'm going to grow. And then he'll hear you on a different podcast or a different stage, or someone will tell him, well, he did, 20 million on his own with one assistant first. So, okay, now I need to focus. And they're chasing so many different squirrels in terms of how to grow instead of just responding to the next right thing. How did you know what that next right thing was?
Right. Well, I don't know if you ever know what the next right thing was, right? But I look back, and I was at a Jeff Shore event, and I'm sorry, I was at a Tom Ferry event, and I'm getting my trainers confused here. And he made an analogy, and I was like, that's exactly what I tell people, but I don't use the same analogy. And it's the three little pigs analogy. So, he said, you've got the stick house, you've got the straw house, and then you've got the brick house, right?
Mhm.
And so he said, if you were asked what's your business built out of, most agents would probably say, I think I've got some straw, I think I've got some sticks, and I think I've got some bricks, right? Well, that's exactly what I've done over the 27 years. Is I look at my business and say, you know, really, where do we stink? Like, where can we get much, much, much better? And inevitably, it was something I was running because I was running everything. Right. So when I had new agents coming on board, I was trying to train them and help them. And I'm like, this is not me. I'm not good at it. I'm not super analytical. I need to hire a trainer. So we put a brick
Yeah.
in that. Right. My expansion office over on the Kansas side of the state line. What do I need to do there? I need to hire a manager to put a brick in it. Right. So over 27 years, I think now we've got a really nice brick business that sometimes the mortar gets loose and you got to fix it, but there's no more straw, there's no more sticks in our business, in my opinion.
Well, in talking to you in the pre-show, you had mentioned that because I had asked you if a team, what's the difference between a mega team or an expansion team and just a brokerage? Like if I started a brokerage, Remington Ramsey brokerage, and then just put everyone under me, or if I did a big brand, Remax, and put everyone under me, what's the difference between doing that and what a team is? Um, and your response was interesting. Part of your response was, there's people who will do 50 million just with two people, and they might even make more money than you from that, from what you're doing with your expansion team. However, you're doing that on purpose because you're trading time for money.
Right.
And tell me about that, because I think that again, someone's listening to this and they're thinking, I want to be the guy at the top. Sounds like he just delegates everything. But how do you bring value? How do you first of all, how do you start trading time for money to get to where you're at? And then I'll have a follow-up question.
Yeah, that's easy. You just give up the money, right? So,
Yeah.
uh,
Well,
no,
you said so the
and
trainer, you said like you weren't good at training. So you hire a trainer and you give up the money. How do you determine, how much to give up, how much to keep working? At
right,
some
right.
point you've lost capital.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that that's where the organic growth comes from, right? Like, did I think at that time, can I continue to run the training piece of this? And I knew I couldn't, not without giving up family time and all of that. So, yeah. Matter of fact, when I hired my trainer, she sold for me, so I made a portion of money off her sales. I had to give that money up and then go to salary. So it was a big swing in that, and I think you just have to look at your finances and say, can I do it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when I hired my listing or my marketing agent, graphic design artist, like, it was scary. I was like, I don't know if I can do this, but I can't. My flyers and my newsletters and stuff don't look the same as hers. So I know I needed something better. So I think really you just have to look at your finances and decide, am I willing to give that up in order to have the time? Now, in my mind, I knew if I gave that up, I could make that money back by going out and recruiting and growing.
Right.
Right. So
So is that where you're at now? Is that where you spend most of your time is recruiting, or what hats are you currently wearing within the structure of your own company?
yeah, pretty much my day revolves around, just growing the team, recruiting. I mean, I'll put out some fires here and there, but I mean, we've even got managers in place in all of our offices, so I don't field a lot of calls on that kind of stuff. But I'm a cheerleader for the team, and I'm always like, I'm on Facebook, like, supporting everybody and doing different things there, and making sure they understand that they're very valued on the team and things like that. But really, I'm working on the business and not in the business. So people will say, hey, are you working your COI to get a listing? And I'm like, no, I'm working a developer to get 300 listings. Or
Mm.
I'm working an agent that does 30 million a year and does 100 transactions to get 100 deals a year. So
Yeah.
to me, I tell people my COI list gets the raw end of the deal a little bit. All the people I've sold to, because I don't, like, hey, if you want to sell with us, come on, but I'm not gonna, like, go after you super hard.
Sure.
But they get tickets to sporting events and stuff. They're okay. They're pretty happy. So
Well, I know you definitely live on your people. I saw a recent post that had a billboard where you were honoring the people on your team that were in the real producers list.
yeah.
What's your thoughts on billboards and marketing? I wanted to talk a little bit about advertising because you had talked to Bobby about advertising during the recession when no one else does.
Yeah, yeah. So you want to talk about the recession advertising first
Yeah,
or the
tell me about
billboards?
so. Well, start with the billboard. What's your thoughts on billboards?
Okay.
And
So people always ask, right? How do you track the billboards? How many leads you get from the billboards? And I just say we don't track it. Like, you can't track it, right? I mean, you don't know how many people see something, go to the website, whatever. But it's so good for all kinds of different things for us. It's a digital billboard, so we can change the message all the time. Example, the real producers, obviously, we had 3 people on the team that were in the 40 under 40, um, or I say episode in the magazine,
yeah,
the issue. And so, we put them on the billboard, and all of their COI list is, oh my gosh, you're on a billboard and you're famous and you're this and you're that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
they're loving it. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm on the greatest team and stuff. So, I mean, it's just good for all of that. I mean, I've had kids that have won a soccer championship, and we put their stuff on there, and the agent's like, "Oh my gosh, my kid wants to sit in the parking lot across from the billboard and just watch it all day." Um, so
That's
we
how it
put,
works, man. Like that, you're exactly right. It doesn't. It. Yeah, you literally said we don't track it, and I think one of your quotes was though, if you're not on the billboard, you can guarantee there's zero leads.
right, right,
So
right,
I love that perspective too, because I think that people are looking at options and they're thinking about one thing. How much money, and I say this all the time about ROI. How much money can I give you and how much money will I be able to track immediately or in the next year from giving you that money? And I don't think that's a good look on things. I mean, how many of your agents when they're being recruited because they're being recruited on a daily basis or they're thinking
right.
about their options, there's high turnover rates, not only in the industry, but also from brokerage to brokerage. How many of them subconsciously are that's just a drop in the bucket of one of the many things that you do to make them feel loved. And that
Yeah.
comes into play when they're considering or not considering making a jump. I think
Yeah.
that's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the one thing I'm probably the most proud of in the business is our retention. We just don't have a lot of people leave, and the people that do leave are usually agents that aren't going to do business anywhere else anyway.
Yeah.
It's probably not the right business for them for the most part. So our retention is really, really good. And I think that's because we have so much value. And,
Yeah.
the billboard is just one of, like you said, many things that we provide to them for value.
Well, let's talk about those many things, not necessarily the loving on piece, but marketing in general. You really believe in marketing so much so that you started a marketing firm. What's your philosophy on marketing?
Yeah. So, a lot of times I'll have a team lead call me and say, "Hey, can we do lunch or whatever?" And I want to just kind of pick your brain on stuff that's not on my team. And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So we'll go to lunch. And the first thing I ask them, they'll have a team of 5 or 6 or 10 or whatever. And I'll say, "What is the value that you provide to your team?" And don't tell me it's leads, and don't tell me it's your knowledge and your mentorship, because none of that is retention. It's going to be good for retention later, right? Because you can provide leads to 5 people.
Mhm.
Can you provide leads to 215 people?
Yeah, much
It's
tougher.
it's virtually impossible to make them all of their business be your leads, or majority of their business be your leads, right? So, and then mentorship and knowledge, I've got people on my team doing, 40, 50, $60 million a year. They're not walking into my office going, "Hey, will you tell me how to sell a house?" Or "Will you tell
Right.
me how to," I mean, they're in the trenches. They probably have more real estate knowledge than I do, right? Because
Right.
they're in the trenches every day selling $60 million a year.
So then how do
So
you build that loyalty?
yeah, so you have to have value. So some of the things that we have a full marketing team, we have a graphic design artist, we have an events coordinator, we have a social media um, graphics person as well. So social media, she does consulting on that and helps them with reels and all of that jazz. We have 2 office managers, we have a lead coordinator, we have a trainer, we have 4 moving vans, so our clients get to use moving vans for free. We have all the magazines, we have all the billboards, we have all the social media ads. We spent, I think my profit and loss just the other day, for the first 10 months is over $700,000 in marketing that we've already spent for the year.
Is
So
that in all markets?
yeah, that's in all markets,
Yeah.
right? So, but could I cut that down? Absolutely. But I don't believe that if I cut out $300,000 that I'm just going to put $300,000 in my pocket. I feel like that may lose agents that actually make me money,
Sure.
and I don't retain them.
Mhm.
So I think there's so much to a team leader that these people get on a team, and there's really no value to be on a team, and I think that's where you don't see teams grow. Like you've watched us go from, I mean, an individual agent at 2.1 million to over 800 million, and it's been 26 years of straight growth.
Mhm.
um, so what is the reason there? And I think it's because we retain people and we don't lose them. If you're just losing and adding people again, your numbers are just going to kind of flow along the same.
We can geek out about this topic all day because this is Real Producers 101. I mean, our revenue comes from advertising partners who advertise in our magazines and come to our events. You said $700,000 just this year on advertising. How do you pick the mediums? Do you let your agents come and what they're excited about? You co-op with them? Do you choose for them? Like I already know you're doing billboards. What else goes into that number?
Yeah, so I say we don't track billboards. We track pretty much everything else. The billboards is the one thing that we can't track well, because you don't know, like when you throw up your website or whatever, you don't know that they saw the billboard and then went to the website. We just see the website numbers and, oh, the website traffic's been good this month or whatever. So, and there's probably something to do with the billboard there, but everything else, yeah, we really track where our leads come from. Um, we do Zillow, but we've been as high as $27,000 a month with Zillow. We've been as low as $1,000 a month with Zillow. We do other lead stuff. We do a lot of forced registration. That's been big. Our magazines and things like that. A lot of people will tell you like, "Oh, print's dead." Well, we got 1,500 leads off our print last year.
How do you
So
know that there's a QR in the actual ad?
We have lots of different ways. We have call rail numbers, we have QR codes, we have different ways of tracking all that stuff. So, and again, some of that, even if I made no money off the magazines, your agents get to sit down in a listing presentation and say, hey, the other agent that you're interviewing, I know them, and here's what they don't do compared to us. We're going to put you in this magazine, this magazine. You're going to be in all the grocery stores. You're going to be on the billboard. You're going to be, all of this stuff. And I think, so I think, a lot of times they might get a listing that they wouldn't have gotten because of all of our advertising. And so we all make money that way as well. And it's not just straight, tracking it from the exact marketing source that we have.
Well, I mean, the truth of the matter, and we talk about marketing all the time on this podcast, is the stacking effect. If you're in a grocery store, a billboard, and a magazine with the same ad, and someone goes past that billboard, it might have been the reminder that they needed after 10 times of seeing it in the grocery store and the magazine, but the billboard was the last thing to the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of reaching out to you guys. So if you're doing that, you made the comment, if I took it $700,000 down to $300,000, you wouldn't have that stacking effect. You would have one thing in one place, and the amount of times those eyeballs see your brand or that person would diminish. And the love effect of loving on your people would immediately diminish because you wouldn't be doing that. So
right. And then if you lose, then you go lose somebody that does good business, and maybe you make $30,000 off that person. The magazine cost you $20,000 for the year. Like, what did you do there? So I just believe that there's got to be value, and some of that is in like all of that stuff, like you said, and kind of stacking it as the advertising goes.
What do you think about, so we're in the last 18 months, real estate recession, advertising in a recession when no one else does. What do you think will happen in the following 18 months if everyone else drops out of advertising? What actually physically happens in that moment?
Oh, that'd be great, right? So back in 2008, when all of that was happening, and I really started hearing it in 2005, to be honest with you, people said, oh man, it's kind of changing. Things are, things are setting longer, and you started seeing houses stack up a little bit. And then 2006 kind of got, not great and stuff. And everybody was like, save your money. Don't advertise. And we have some pretty big magazines that go out here in town. And so back then I called our magazine that we knew, and I said, how much for the front cover? And they were like, well, it's normally $5,000, but we'll sell it for $2,000. And I said, well, I'll give you $500, but I want all 12 months. Right. And I'll do $500 a month for 12 months. And they were like, no, can't do that. And about 3 days later, they call me and say, okay, would you take 10 months of that or whatever? So, so we started being on the fronts of every magazine, the back of magazines. Back then there was still newspaper stuff that was good. So it was a lot of print back then, which isn't the same today, but it really, we went from 75 deals to 375 deals through the recession. So people were still getting divorced. They were still having babies. They were still getting job promotions. I mean, there was still, when somebody would come into my office and say, well, it's a recession, nobody's selling, I'd just get on MLS and go, well, 20,000 homes have sold so far this year.
Yeah. How many of them were you?
Yeah. You can't get 10 or 20 of those. Like, come on. So, so I've always followed one of my favorite quotes is Warren Buffett, when others get greedy, you be fearful, but when others get fearful, you get greedy. Right. So when everybody started backing out of the market, I'm like, I think this is my time. And what happened there was, new construction builders and developers started noticing, because they were the ones that had the listings. And they were like, we've got to get with somebody that is at least trying to sell our product. And so, I went from having 0 neighborhoods to like 6 in a matter of like a year. During that time. So that's what kind of started the growth. And then I could step out of buyers, and then eventually step out of listings and just work on the business and not in the business.
So when's the last time you sold a house?
Oof. I have no idea. It's been years. Yeah. I don't even even when I buy my own, I have one of the agents write it up, because I'm like, I'm not sure I know exactly what the contracts are meaning. So we've got people for that.
I feel like that's a interesting dynamic of coaching someone at the top who doesn't do the thing anymore. And a lot of people I've heard uh, don't like that. You want someone who's leading by example, but I don't know that it's possible for you to bring the value and build the team if you were leading by example. Even if you sold one home a year, like you're doing what you want them to do, which is what they're good at, and outsourcing the rest and spending money to gain back your time. Why is time so important to you? What do you do with the time that you've bought back?
Yeah. Well, what's the only thing we can't get more of?
Time.
Time, right? So I've got, two kids. I've made every basketball practice, every basketball game, every swim meet. Today I picked my son up, who's my 15-year-old's a pretty good little basketball player, and he's got big Division 1 dreams and stuff. And I actually built a gym, basketball gym myself, because I was tired of practicing in middle schools and elementary schools. And so we built a gym, and I'm picking him up at 3 o'clock today, and we're going to be training until 6 o'clock tonight, 6:30 tonight. So, and it's fun. He loves it. I get to go do that, and I don't have a listing appointment at 3 o'clock. Right.
Yeah.
So, when you're on your deathbed, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how many assets you have, how many houses you own, all that stuff. It's, do you have your kids around you, or your family, or your friends, or whoever, and you've made an impact on them, and you've made an impact on a lot of other people. And I think that's more important than all the money. I 100%, I don't make as much money as some of the agents out there. I think our company, we had our big event, and there was 800 people in the crowd, and I was the number one agent in our company, and we brought in like $17,900,000, something like that. The next guy brought in like $17,200,000, right? And I'm a team of like 150 at the time, and he's a team of 3. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is the dude making the money. Right.
Yeah.
But he himself would say, like, I work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I have no life.
Yeah.
Like, it's all I do. And so for me, I mean, what's enough money? I mean, we live a pretty good life, and I have a basketball gym. So that's enough money to build a gym. I'm good with that. So
Inviting Pat Mahomes over for a game of pickup.
that's right. That's right.
All right, so let me throw one curveball at you, Rob. How do you live that life? You mentioned being home at 3 and not having a listing appointment, but people on your team don't have that luxury. How do you promote their lifestyle to become what if they want to have the same thing you have? Someone's got to do that listing appointment. How do they find balance? Is it just for a time that they're doing this? Is it
Yeah. So I've got what we call the beach plan, and that's how can they lay on the beach and still make money. And I teach them to do exactly what I did, right? So when I paid attention to the industry, like, the big agents would lose people all the time. It was just turnover like crazy. And I said, I don't want that. I want my people to stay forever, right? So what does that look like? First of all, it looks like you don't make as much money on them. You make little money over 30 years versus a whole lot of money, and they leave you after 2 years, right? And you have to then continually replace. But basically, I went to our top agents, and I said, what does that look like for you? Like, what do you want your future to look like? And they said, well, I'd like to delegate some stuff and maybe have a team someday. And so I don't know, but I believe we were probably the first team in the country to do this, because I did a ton of research and I could find nobody else doing it at the time. But we literally have teams under my team. So
Okay.
we will have different teams under the Rob Ellerman team umbrella. So yeah, so, like, we have an example is Atlas Home Group. Um, Kim Flanner came over, and she's like, I want to run a team, but I just don't have all the value, right? And so we gave her all the value, and now she recruits people. We put them through our processes and our training and our marketing and things like that, and she gets to make a percentage off of them. So we've got several different groups under us that's doing a great job of that. The Mickey Armstrong Group, we've got KC Advantage Group, the Atlas Home Group. So we've got lots of different groups underneath us that
Sure.
I'm hating that I need to say everybody now at this point, and not just put a few. But
Shout outs.
Yeah. Shout out.
That would be a show that we do not have time for.
Right, I know, no, and everybody's different. Like I've got some people that say I want 2 or 3 people and that's max. And I've got some groups that have, 10, 11, 12 people underneath. And so
Uh,
that person is doing the same thing, trading time for money.
Well, that's my question, Rob. Do you feel like there's a time where you have to do the work when you don't want to for a certain amount of time before you can become the person that delegates and puts time back in their schedule? Like, or is this something that someone who's listening to this now can implement immediately?
Yeah, I think it takes time. And I think where I got, you might say, I guess you could say lucky, or I just hit it at the right time, was I started thinking about doing this as I was growing. And so I never had a down money year, because even when I gave away, something that I did and I paid a salary for it, then I worked on growing and we grew and I made money.
Yeah.
Right. Or made more money than the year before. So I think it's really hard now when you've got somebody that's making, three or 400,000 or $700,000 or whatever. And they're like, well, I want to do this. Well, you're probably going to take a step backwards and give up some of your money for time, because the most money you can make on any given transaction is if you do the whole thing yourself.
Mhm.
Right. So I remember being on a golf course with a young salesman who is now my broker here, who's an absolute amazing broker, but he was selling at the time. And we were on the golf course and we were putting on the green and his phone is just going crazy. And he's like, how does your phone not ring? You do so much more business than me and your phone just doesn't ring that much. And I said, well, you got to delegate. I said, what do you have going on? He said, I've got 3 buyers and they're taking up a ton of my time. And I said, well, delegate it out. And he said, well, but each one I make 10 grand on. And I said, but what if you didn't touch it and you made 5 grand on each one?
Yeah.
And he's like, but it's not 10 grand.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I know, but if you spend your time going out and getting more business, then you could do 3 more $10,000 deals if you wanted. And now you've made 45 grand or whatever. Right. So if you wanted to do it that way.
And the sad thing about that is if we scale up the numbers, we all know people in every market who are in real estate way longer than they should be because they have to be, and their numbers are bigger, but it's the same line of thinking. It's 20 grand commission. It's 50 grand commission. It's 100 grand commission.
Yeah.
And I got to, and there's no retirement plan, and they have to keep doing it because they have not stopped thinking like that guy on the golf course.
Yeah. I had a buddy the other day call me and he wanted to go see a $2.6 million house, which is big for our market here in Kansas City. And I called an agent and said, hey, this person wants to go see this, and you go show it tomorrow. And absolutely. And we did the handoff and so
Yeah.
you can't get the rosy colored glasses or whatever, you see that money, because eventually your team, one of the big things for me, I guess, is I don't love being at companies that the owners are the people who are selling, the brokers are the people who are selling, because to me it's a conflict of interest.
Mhm.
So I don't even do that from a team leader position. So I usually don't want my owners or my brokers doing that. Right.
Mhm.
It just, to me, seems like, there's going to be a conflict there at some point. And if there's not, there could be.
Yeah.
Right. If a lead walks in the door, what's that?
You just take it out of the equation.
Yeah, I just take it out of the equation, because if a lead walks in the door, and even let's not even say a lead for a house. Let's say a lead for an agent, like a new agent walks in the door and says, hey, I'm looking to be a part of a team. I don't really want to be on my own. I want to be a part of a team. But the owners of the company are a bunch of team leads. Do you think they're going to say, hey, Rob, this is a great person for your team? That's part of the reason I've grown at Reese Nichols so much is, our owners, Warren Buffett, our brokers don't sell. Our president doesn't sell. And so somebody walks in the door and says, I'm looking for a team. Me and several of the teams in here get to interview. Right.
Mhm.
So the reason I've got so many people on the team is partly because, I'm getting referrals from our own company on that. So I love that piece of it. Now, I don't want to be two-faced. There are some of the brands that I do have owners that sell, and there hasn't been a whole lot of conflicts, maybe a couple little, but sometimes you have to be in a certain area and that's just where you have to be. Right. That you don't have the choice. But I do love that. And I think I lead by example on our team on that, because nobody's worried about me taking their listing.
Yeah.
Right. I had somebody call me the other day that I knew, and they said, hey, I've interviewed one of your agents, but I know you. If I go with you, do I get more stuff? And I said, absolutely not. Like, she's going to take great care of you. You're going to get all the marketing, you get everything I would. And as a matter of fact, you're going to get way better service because I don't do this. So you're going to fire me, but you're not going to fire her because she's great at it. And, she came in and was, she was like, man, that's awesome.
I mean, how many people would have said the opposite because of the way that their situation is set up? I mean, that conflict of interest is huge. Rob, you've got a great humble spirit about you for someone who's doing, close to $1 billion annually. I mean, it's just incredible what you've built. It's no wonder why you're leading at such a high level, and I love that humble spirit. That's all the time we have for today. Any hope you have for the next 6 months as we start to see the market do something?
Yeah. I mean, I think, we're in an election year. So we've always said every year that's an election year, it's always a little bit slower on that end. I do think the general public is a little more numb to the election stuff, because it's the same rhetoric over and over again a lot of times. So I don't think it's going to be an awful end to the year, but I do think it's going to slow down some, and we're going to kind of see what happens. But I think most people are kind of like, it really doesn't matter at this point. Like, we're going to get who we get, and it is what it is. And I mean, I know some people have like really, like, they're probably going, that's not true, Rob. We got to have this person.
Yeah, we got people driving right now pounding their steering.
Right.
What are you talking about, man?
Yeah, and I know I understand that, and I don't disagree with them on certain things, but at some point you got to just keep working, right? You just got to keep going, and it's like I mentioned in the recession, like when people said nothing was selling, and I could pull up 20,000 houses sold, like there's still going to be stuff that sells. You got to go out there, and who are you outworking to get those deals?
Yeah, Well, Rob, I appreciate you joining the show. We didn't say this at the top of the hour, but you were the first front cover for Real Producers in Kansas City. Appreciate your time today. Appreciate all the hot takes that you had. And if you want to influence who we have on the show or what we talk about, send us an email at podcast@realproducersmag.com. Rob, it's been great.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate you.
We'll see you next time.